join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you could join me for a moment of silence for men and women in uniform. Thank you. Call this meeting to order 2 minutes after. John, any adjustments to the agenda?
Yeah, we received a resignation letter today that we'll have to deal with.
So we'll put that under new business, please, under number 9. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of January 6th?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the minutes from January 6th with any additions or corrections.
Second?
Any changes to it from anybody? All set? All in favor? Thank you. Public to speak under non-agenda items. Thank you. Boards and committees, would you want to talk about the quarterly meeting that you had last Wednesday?
Yeah, we had a presentation of, for cable and high-speed internet and whatever, not cable. And I think you gave it to Sandy River the week before, something like that. Anyway, and it was interesting. It's not gonna be cheap,
Yeah.
whatever we do, but there are better ways of doing it, I think, than, there's like, 4 different companies and stuff, and we just have to figure out which one we wanna use, kinda, if that's what we wanna do. So, I don't know, it was interesting. It's not gonna happen overnight, that's for sure.
That's right, you missed that presentation.
The first one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
when at the other selectmen's meeting.
Yeah.
Well, we're supposed to, excuse me,
Yeah.
we're supposed to
Yeah.
get an update from Consolidated, which we didn't have,
Right.
and that's pretty soon, so that'll be interesting to see where they come in.
And we had heard from Matrix on their own, I don't know, a while ago.
Quite a while.
And they're part of the, one of the people they're discussing about using them, Consolidated. Can't remember else, but anyway. So, it was definitely eye-opening.
Yes.
What he suggested was that to Rangeley, along in coordination with the plantations, is to form a broadband committee. And there were 2 assessors present from Dallas Plantation, 1 from Sandy River, and neither of the Rangeley Plantation assessors could make it, so Liz Sweeney was here. And
That's the second time she's seen that presentation, right? Because she was here at the meeting for the
correct. So she, if I remember correctly, I think they're all gonna go back and brainstorm. They suggested a small committee, and, someone with a financial background, someone with technology, a young adult, suggested a town manager and be a part of it, and said it should not be a large committee, but just someone, just a group that can collect information and share it. You disseminate it. And so Laura Reynolds was here from the Economic Development Group, and she offered to kind of coordinate that with the plantations reaching out to her with their suggested names so she can compile things. It's been a part of the Economic Development Committee's goals is to, Kate Williamson's put a lot of time into broadband needs, and so that was one action item that seemed to come out of it.
They did say maybe an assessor and one other person, or a selectman from one other person be found, so you got 8 people instead of 20.
Anything else, Cindy?
No, the other plantations really didn't have anything to report. Yeah, I think that's kind
Anything from you, Ethan?
I don't think so. The fellow from Sandy River, I think he was hoping someone else would show up with him, so he really
Yeah.
was here just kind of listening. And most of the meeting was taken up with the fiber optic presentation, I thought. And I don't think there was anything remarkable after that.
Our next meeting will be at Dallas Plantation. They said they would host
Yeah,
it.
that's right.
Yeah, that was someplace.
Yeah, we came up with a tentative date, right? Kind of a shot in the dark. Yeah, just pick a date and see what happens.
Yeah.
I don't have my notes on that meeting with me.
Dave, anything on that? No? Anything else for boards or committees?
Just the next meeting is scheduled for March 25th. Anybody write that down? I did.
That's what it was.
And I have a note here that says Economic Development Committee will follow up on creating the broadband committee. So, there's a couple of notes that I have that I didn't have.
Was that a suggested date, or did they put this one in stone for that day? Did you all agree to that
No, I
date?
think they picked that date to go up to Dallas, I believe.
Mhm.
Picked it for lack of a better date.
Okay.
The way I heard it discussed is we'll pick this date and then we'll see who has a conflict as we close in on that date.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. Very good, thank you. Consent items, group dynamics contract. This is MMA's group. We need a motion to authorize the town manager to sign after discussion. John, you wanna fill in some of the blanks or make a
Yeah,
little?
we had a different company and they, I guess, went out of business or sold what they had. And so just, what, a few months ago, we got notice of a new company, but a year ago, I asked it, how come we're not with them at the one MMA uses? And we had just signed the contract, so they're no longer with it. So I think, we looked into what their program was, and I think that's the one to go with. Well, one thing I remember, we had this group in Mexico and Rumford, and originally, through the HR thing, we would get the employee share of the medical bill, and then send it into this third-party HRA group, and then they would reimburse the employee, and then send the town the bill. So I know through this group here, it seems to be better organized because it's, when MMA Insurance receives the doctor or hospital bill, they send the locals your share, your copay, directly to this group, and you don't have to do, the employee doesn't have to do anything, just they'll receive a check in the mail, whatever that bill was.
Their portion of,
Their portion.
Yeah.
Yeah, the hospital will get its
yep.
payment, and then the employee will get the copay. So, and then the town would get monthly reports of, all the amounts of money, not the cause, but, that's all HIPAA related, but the amounts of money that they would disperse into the employees, so each year the town would have to make up the difference, so. With the original budget called for $3,400 for a family and $17 for a single. And then once that gets reached, then the employees are fully covered through MMA, so there should be no more copay, so that's the limit. So, and the town saved a lot of money by lowering the insurance from the Class A plan to this plan, which is PPO 200, and saved a lot of money because of the lowering of the, or I should say the increase in the copay, all the employee-related charges. So it costs MMA less through the insurance, and it costs us less for the insurance policy, even with the HRA amount that we budgeted, so. Pretty much how it works. It was by us lowering the insurance we provided to the employees, by doing this, it didn't take away any of the benefits the employees had. And we saved a lot of money through the process each year, you know. I mean, each year they have adjustments, but on the whole, we saved, because the policy that MMA is responsible for is less money to them.
Okay, questions from the board?
So doing this doesn't hurt the employees at all, is that what you're saying?
When the employees had the
Yeah,
health
sure.
insurance, pretty much you go to the doctor, you never see a bill,
Yeah.
because you're pretty much covered for everything. So now you're not covered for everything, but the value of what you're not covered for, to make up the difference is like, I said, $3,400 for an employee. So the town share of that, probably, I don't know, I wasn't here, but it was definitely reduced by more than that $3,400.
Yeah, no.
The town initially saved a lot of money, and the employees haven't lost anything, because they'll now be reimbursed through this up to that amount of money, and once they reach that, if they ever reach that, like, example for me, I think I claimed about $600 worth of bills on the $3,400 you have available for me. So the real value to the town is you only have to come up with that money once, which we did a few years ago. Now all you gotta do is make up the difference each year, and you carry the balance forward, make up the $600 instead of,
Right.
see what I mean?
Yep.
Or nothing, if an employee doesn't use anything, it, doesn't cost us anything. There's a definite two-time saving for the town. The initial changeover and the annual amounts that what's used have to be made up. It's a good deal. And I think this is a better company, this company. MMA recommended them right off the bat 4, 5, 6 years ago.
Anything else? Any other questions? Dave, Donnie?
No.
Need a motion?
I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to sign the health reimbursement arrangement between the town of Rangeley and Group Dynamic, Inc.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? So moved. Thank you. Any correspondence? I have none. Anybody?
No.
Okay. Old business, forced account explanation number. We received a letter from Barry Hammer from the FAA. I'll read it to you. Dear Mr. Madigan, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, New England Region Airport Division has received the town's inquiry about the condition associated with your office's approval of the force account work on the subject referenced project. Specifically, you inquired about the validity of the requirement to consider all excess funds associated with the payment of sponsor-provided materials as airport revenue. Upon review of our inquiry and in consideration of the source material being furnished, you are correct that reimbursement to you as the sponsor for materials not owned or considered airport property should not be considered airport revenue. As such, please accept this letter as an amendment to the FAA's prior approval, withdrawing the requirements to consider the funds as airport revenue. We sincerely apologize for originally including this condition and for any inconvenience it may have caused. If you should have any further questions regarding this matter, please do not hesitate to contact me at the following. Signed, Barry Hammer.
Wow.
John, anything you want to say about this?
Yeah. This is a result from Cindy's inquiry, and she deserves the credit for them.
I'm
being
sorry,
willing to
we can't
straighten
hear
this
you.
out.
I can't.
What's that?
Excuse me, we can't hear.
Cindy had sent me an email pretty much saying that none of the materials taken was taken from airport property. It was all town property. So why is there a requirement that all the revenues from that has to be allocated strictly on the airport, and it can't be used by the town anywhere else. And that's what they addressed. I sent him a copy of her email, and,
We had had a public discussion as well, you know, when the, during that meeting as well, and I followed up the public discussion with an email to John saying, just in case I wasn't clear.
yeah, she wanted to clarify what she had said at the selectmen meeting. So, I decided to make sure the FAA clearly understands what she was asking. I sent a copy of his letter to us saying we had to use that money for airport projects only, and sent along the email Cindy had sent me. And then I got an email from him when he read it, and he said, how did he word it? He said, "Thanks for bringing this to my attention." And when I saw that, I thought, wow, they might have made a mistake. And sure enough, I get this letter, and they made a mistake in their interpretation. I don't think they realized this wasn't coming from airport property. It was coming from Chick-fil-A. So it made a difference, because now they're just buying our material, period. And we get the benefit from that. So now we can, I will say, we have several projects in the near future that will require the use of some of that local match out of that fund, but a good chunk of it can be used for anything else, and we all know we need a lot of money to do these road projects, so it might alleviate us from having to borrow the whole $3 billion, we might get by having to borrow a little less than that. We have time to analyze all that and figure out what's gonna be the best interest of the town. So, thank you for the email, because you clarified it to me, and when I sent it, I said, even, the D&K engineer that we had, he even emailed me back and said he agrees with your take on that, so.
Well, it was just, we seemed to be going around and around, during that discussion
Yeah, we
period,
were.
so I
A
just.
couple of meetings,
yeah. And in all honesty, it was Shelley Lowell that first brought this up. She was
Yeah.
the first board
I
member to
remember that,
really
just before she left.
question, so.
So anyway, we're free to allocate that money to any projects we want.
Larry?
So, upon auditing that, if one were to audit that account, Shane McDougal is the one that helped raise some of that money.
The initial amount was $600 and something thousand on the force account, which was our 5% share. It started out 560,000, and because of the change orders, they picked up all of our 5% shares right up to the total cost of the project. So that's why it jumped over to over 600,000.
So the force account, not including AIP money, is now 600 and change?
That was 600,000, and then Shane's effort to get the contractor to buy the remaining amount that he needed above and beyond the force account produced another 400,000.
So now there's $1 million.
There's $1 million, all funded, the 400,000 came directly from Sargent.
Without affecting any AIP money, there's $1 million+ in that account.
Right.
And Shane got paid how? Out of that account or through the town's revenue?
Out of that 400,000 one. He got-
Percentage of?
It was like
He's paid.
400,000.
Yeah.
Out of the 400?
Out of the 400,000, that's where he negotiated.
So,
The original contract you're referring to, with getting the money, was Du Bois King.
that's
Shane
correct,
was
that's
with
correct. I knew
them,
Shane-
but,
I didn't know, that seemed convoluted to me, I didn't know where Shane got involved in that.
yeah, and then Shane left the company, and then negotiated the $400,000 for us.
That's great that we have $1 million in there. I understood Guy Ruel at the airport meetings that there was a difference between force account and AIP money.
That's what we all understood,
Correct.
until we just got this letter from FAA.
No, I understood that it was two parts of it. I understood that it was two different pots of gold. AIP money was not force account.
We didn't allocate any AIP money last year, we transferred that to the downtown, it was like 25,000. Oh, there might be a balance left in
No,
there.
we're allocated $125,000 a year, correct, to AIP money that goes to the airport.
Okay.
That's separate.
No, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, so that's a different account.
That's separate.
Or it might be the same account, but it's.
This is all grant related.
So, if the FAA is correct, and if you are 100% sure that you can use that, what is the highest cost of money that our town is paying out that would benefit everyone?
Yeah.
It would be where you'd want to allocate that $1 million, in my opinion. So grandma, and grandpa, as well as all of us sitting here, would get the most bang for the buck without having an evaluation.
We've got budget talks that start next week.
Yeah.
You agree with me? Sam?
27th, I think, is when we should have everything ready for you.
Because I don't know what your debt services costs. I don't know, your bond might be for 2%. You may
Yeah,
have some-
we put in the article that the townspeople voted on, not more than 4%.
Okay,
And Rebecca has sent out notices to all the banks to give.
she hasn't heard back from them.
Not that I've heard today, so.
So, but that's would be, I mean, if you're gonna spend it, you should get the most bang for it, that everyone gets the most benefit.
Thank you. Mark?
Two things. One, I was just gonna mention to Larry that, that force account actually just went away when we got the omnibus grant for 100%
Correct.
funding. So that was no longer needed. And then the other thing about this money, I just asked that in your discussions among yourselves and at the budget and stuff, you might wanna see if you think it's appropriate for the townspeople to have an opportunity to weigh in to see where they might prefer seeing the money
That's where I was supplying.
spent as well.
Thank you. Anything else on this?
Yeah,
Yes?
so I would want you to be aware that Mexico years ago got rid of their mainstay retirement membership, and they left enough in there to cover all existing employees at the time, because they had their own teachers and things like that. The thing changed hands, so I got a call one day that if you write us a letter, we'll send you the balance of the account. I said, well, how much is in there? Well, probably over $600,000. And I'm like, oh my God, well, it turned out to be $705,000. So when I presented that to the selectmen and the budget committee, one of the citizens said, we should give everybody a tax break of 7 mils. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That's the worst thing you can do with that, so just be aware that the thing we did with it was we you couldn't pay off the bond, because it was with the bond bank.
Right.
But we saved that, and each year we paid that year's bond payment and interest on a $500,000 bond, which we had taken for 5 years. And that pretty much used.
So you didn't have to raise the
We
funds.
didn't have to raise the
Yeah,
money for
I
that
think that's
bond.
going to be key, is what, just to keep, again, is to keep our budget level and to use this money wisely. I mean, because it doesn't matter if you set, $200,000 aside to keep the mill rate down, if our
Commitment.
if our budget is X number of dollars, then that is what the assessor has to plug into the formula, and then you've got your range of the mill rate there. I mean, whatever, it'd be important to not have to raise
Yeah. So,
as much money.
a further benefit from that was because we had held back all that money to pay a 5-year bond, each year it depleted by 1/5 of the money. So when we did back Kingdom Road, each year they were giving me $125,000 to go into the road reserve fund for construction. Well, we got almost to the end of the project, and we were over $200,000 short. So we were able to borrow from ourselves with that cash flow, and then the next year, when we got the $125,000 usual allocation for the road money. We put that in the fund where the money was reserved for paying off the bond, and it worked out, so it didn't cost any extra money for financing, because we had that flexibility to borrow from ourselves.
You had another comment?
Yeah, two. One was at one of the meetings, the other thing that John might want to look into was out of that money, at least at one of the meetings from the FAA said, if our costs of the airport went up after the first year, it could come out of that. In other words, that could be either AMP money or remember he said if your $38,000 number became 48, you could find 10 out of that. You're welcome to use that as airport operations money. That was before you got this letter.
Yeah, I was under the understanding that any airport project or maintenance could come from that.
That's correct. So you might want to make sure that you're safe on your $38,000 for the next 10 years based on what that has for added costs.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I mean, is it crazy that you just throw that money aside, draw off what it pulls down to reduce taxation? It's gonna make $100,000 a year.
It's worth looking at. I mean, we had a discussion at our last
Leave it
meeting
for an
about
emergency fund.
how can we pull in, how can we create revenue? How can we create more?
You know, if I had $1 million windfall, I wouldn't go pay off my new roof. I'd get $100,000 a year out of it for a long, long time. Food for thought, huh?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Anything else on this? Thank you. Thank you. Solar update. Solar update. We got a lot of material here. Let me just ask the board, or tell the board, we have invited, I know Steve's in the room, a number of people to come and give us, talk to us some more about that. I'm very glad you're here. Thank you for coming. Do you have any questions before we move forward? And I'll ask Steve to talk to us about solar. Okay, Steve.
Just to give you an update, and might not be exactly what you want to hear, but we received a request to see if we were interested in participating in an RFP for solar projects for the town. And back in the fall, we looked at Chick Hill and the airport site, and appreciate the town's cooperation giving us all the information. But we're going to have to respectfully decline the offer to participate in the RFP. Since that time, we have put probably in excess of 300 acres of private landowner property under lease agreement as well during that time frame. And we've pretty much exhausted our capacity to do any more projects in this area. So at that point, we'll have to decline the offer as far as our abilities to do anything.
Thank you. Mind answering a few questions?
Sure.
Sit right there, be comfortable. Let me just acquiesce. Does the board have any questions for Steve?
So
That's it?
what
Oh, Cindy does.
So what does this, I think in a prior discussion, you know, the grid has only a certain level of capacity to handle power generated, whether it's wind, solar, etc.
Right, it's kind of like a hose line that's capable of 100 pounds of pressure. You can't put 120 on it without it failing or rupturing, so it's a similar thought process.
So do your projects in the pipeline affect then the ability for Rangeley to
Once
create
a project gets put into the queue with CMP, that the amount of capacity of that project is on the books, and so that counts as though it exists right now.
So
whether it
it's
has or
reserved.
doesn't. It's reserved for that project, and any subsequent projects that come in, you know, take up whatever space is available. And
What space is available now?
to my knowledge, none. I mean, there wasn't a tremendous amount available. I think it was 4 or 6 megawatts off the substation here that we found to be available. And we literally got enough land to do 60 megawatts of project under agreement. So we can't even come close to doing what we have under agreement at this point. And we have at least one project in the queue for the area. And just to put it in perspective, it's much easier to do this with a private landowner, because you're basically dealing with one person. You're saying, you have X amount of land, would you like to lease this to us for the next 40 years? And if they say yes, you can literally do it in days. And it's kind of a more challenging situation dealing with a municipality or anything else, just because of the dynamics, that happen and how it's a public forum. So that certainly impacts. This was an unusual event when the legislation was passed this summer to kind of spur these projects. It was an absolute land grab. I mean, I've been in the power industry for 30 years, and usually stuff takes 100 years to get going. This is just like at a ridiculous pace that the way this is going. Rangeley is not the first municipality that this has occurred to. We were dealing with another town in Maine that desperately wanted a project put in, and a week before we could sign an agreement with the town, a private landowner put his land under agreement, and the space was taken and filled the capacity for that grid area. So it can happen that quickly, again, I've never seen anything like this in my 30 years. Usually it takes forever to get anything going, but it's really been like a wildfire, to be honest with you, so. But now, let me clarify too, that is the type of project that we are offering, where we basically just wanted to lease your land and put our project on there, possibly the benefit of net metering at some point, but our main goal is to lease the property. If some company has another plan where they're not necessarily putting it onto the grid, that may be something you can look at.
I missed that part, I was sneezing. Say, not the whole thing, the last part about the grid?
I said if another company has a proposal where they want to do something with the town, where they don't want to put it out onto the grid, then they may be able to do something with the town, so. I'm only speaking.
Could you clarify that? What does that mean? Battery backup? What?
You would have to buy the power. It'd be like the rooftop scenarios, I would suspect.
Wow.
Unless, the other possibility is there's some sort of net metering contract that another company has. I can't speak to any of that because it's nothing that we can offer. That's all I can say.
So, Donnie?
Is there room left for us to do anything on the grid, no matter who we hire to do it?
I'm not aware of any, but that doesn't mean that another company's business plan might be different than ours, and I don't know how they do it, but right now, see, what happens is we put land under contract. The next part is a due diligence study, and that due diligence study includes a grid capacity assessment, and that's what we had done in the area, and we literally had, actually had a 20 megawatt project with 100 acres slated for the area, and we had to throw it out. We can't even do any of it. It's just not, the space is not there.
Cindy?
Well, I think that your model, when a few of us met, the solar group met, Wes Dugan is the local electrician, does residential solar, et cetera, and he stated that your business model would be the ideal. He felt less risky for the town because of the cost of replacing solar equipment if it was damaged by lightning or other natural elements. And but you warned us about this. You warned us last summer that we needed to move quickly, that it was a land grab. and we did nothing.
What was the last part?
And we did nothing but schedule a meeting, so.
Mark?
Following this CMP transmission line thing, it looks like one of the things that they've offered or have been required to do for support of the state to this point in time is that they would need to upgrade these substations throughout the state on the grid to expand their capacity to take in some green energy. And I don't know what any of the parameters are on that, maybe Steve does, but, you know, if that ends up going through, could the town of Rangeley reasonably expect that their substation would get upgraded and allow them?
It would be based on probably studies by CMP as to what areas they needed to upgrade. And if there was valid reasons, that would probably dictate that. But if the substation was upgraded, then there would certainly be the opportunity at that point to look at projects. It's a little bit confusing. For example, you might have a substation with X amount of capacity, and you have, say, a wind project that's 120 megawatts, and maybe 90% of the time this thing runs at 20 or 30 megawatts, but they have to hold 120 megawatts of capacity in that project no matter what, because the potential exists for it to be there. So it's a little complex to understand and on how the grid works and how capacity and availability does work. If they felt this was a congested area and limited, then they may deem this as an area necessary for upgrades. Certainly the state overall has a lot of areas for upgrades, and Rangeley's not alone here though with this scenario. I mean, there's a lot of places now that, you know, the land rush has kind of subsided, basically because everybody's filled up the capacity. I went to another town nearby, and as soon as I walked in the door, you know, 10 different companies had already been there, and it was like, you're wasting your time, and that was the end of that. That's how rampant this was, but that's basically what you would need to see is probably an upgrade to the substation here.
What do you see as the next step for the state? Do you think that they're going to follow along the lines of reviewing and upgrading transmission lines and upgrading substations, or not?
I think a lot of it will depend on this the big
Transmission line from Canada?
because that's going to be their revenue stream. That, you know, that's being paid for from basically out of state money, and providing that opportunity, you know, the state would leverage that to try to get some of that money put towards upgrades elsewhere. But it's a challenge, and it's kind of a utility thing as well, managed mainly by CMP, because they have the transmission and distribution company for the state, or the lower half of the state. So they will put the money where they deem it necessary.
After our meeting with you last summer, how long after that did you sign the contract with them?
We had contracts signed, I don't recall in our
Ballpark
meetings, but within a month or two we had.
Thank you. Thank you.
But we didn't know the capacity at that point though,
Yeah.
so we continued to
Yeah.
sign.
Steve, can I ask you a question? I
Sure.
met with Re-Energy Friday,
Oh, revision.
excuse me,
Yeah.
Revision. I apologize.
That's
Um,
used to work for the other one.
Whatever it is. My question becomes, my takeaway from that site visit with Nick, I guess to be exact, it wasn't ideal. Based on proximity to three-phase power, based on the terrain, what I thought was gonna be good, et cetera, et cetera. Just want to get your take on, from our site visit, you know, was Chick Hill site in the area we visited, was that even an ideal location necessarily compared to what you've taken on?
We thought it was a good location in the sense that at the time, it seemed like there was still some freedom to do a little landscaping, because the construction was still in progress, so they were taking out the fill, and that there was opportunity to landscape. But certainly, I've had a number of projects turned down because of the slope and stuff like that existed, even though the land was under agreement. So we thought it was a viable site for what we wanted. We were just looking at 10 acres at the time, and that would have given us probably 10 acres of suitable space.
So yeah, just to reiterate, my visit with Nick, he didn't even want to walk completely to the suggested area. Granted, it was snow, didn't really care about snowmobiling. He quickly wanted to go in field 2. That's where he wanted to be. That was the ideal land that he wanted. Didn't really want to look away from that. He took a few pictures, and again, he was adamant about the distance from three-phase power at Chick Hill and everything. So just to put that in there too, where you know, maybe our site that we thought was ideal wasn't even.
Yep, Mark, you had a?
I do. I've been hoping to run into Dennis Marquis, but I haven't. But I was at a Christmas party, and one of the guys worked for an engineering firm down in Gorham, and they work on alternative energy sources. And he was telling me that the line that runs from Rumford to Stratton was built for 68,000, volts. So, but it's only running at 34,000, and thought that somewhere along the line here, if I think he said he thought you needed to be within 3 miles or 5 miles of it, and that you could possibly, instead of going the direction that Rangeley substation goes, it could go out towards Stratton, and which is a bigger grid. And so, where I haven't seen Dennis, do you know anything about that? Could you enlighten me anything more about that situation?
It is possible. We did a flow study on one of the lines here, and we were trying to get a 20 meg project in the ground that would have basically routed the power elsewhere, kind of as you're describing, and we could not come up with the capacity to do the 20 megawatts. We could come up with 10, but that was the cost of infrastructure was too exorbitant to warrant the project at that point.
Dennis made a comment in our committee meeting that we were to look into the capability of the power lines from Chick Hill Airport area back down to the substation and what it could handle, because his feeling, correct me if I don't say this exactly correct, but that it was subject to whether it could hold certain capacities. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, to your point about infrastructure costs, that was something that was gonna have to be looked at as well. That's the only thing I have to offer. Anything else? Steve, thank you very much for coming up.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mainland Phase 2 proposal, we need authorization for the town manager to sign. John, you wanna fill in anything there?
Yeah. You'd only authorize them to do the initial design and done.
Excuse me.
And now that I didn't want to do any more till we got word from Northern Borders Grant, and we have to have an official letter of, to begin by them before they'll allow any of the expenses, so. Susan and I met with,
Mark Hume this morning.
Mark Hume,
Eric LaBelle.
Eric LaBelle from Mainland. We met with both of them today, but, they have the contract already for the first part which is completed, and now that we know we have enough money to do the whole job, I've got two proposals here. One is for the rest of the engineering. He's got to apply to the Army Corps of Engineer, because there's a couple of wet lands up there that may or may not be a major issue, or a minor issue, but if you noticed in the proposal, $3,000 to $4,500, or a fixed cost of $4,100 for permitting and contract documents, bid administration, $3,000 to $5,400, or $5,000, and then construction administration, $30,000 to $50,000. And the reason for that spread is because, we told him that, we may not need him there every day. We certainly don't need a full-time construction inspector, if we need him, call him, might be 1 day a week, 2 days a week. And that would vary with, depending on what we needed. So I think the main part of that job is in-ground drainage with some catch basins and curbs and channel the water, and some cross culverts, and road construction. No water, no sewer, no major issues in there. So in that sense, I think we have enough talent to keep track of that on more of a daily basis and check it here and there, and while it's under construction. So I would recommend that we approve that. And then the other proposal is the original project dealt with the road going into the school up to the top of where it joins in with the airport project. And so to complete that, I'm sorry. So the remainder of the project, from Main Street to the road going into the school, the original concept, when we applied, was to just grind that down and reshape it and compact it, because there wasn't a lot of work like going up above. So to design the drain pipes, because what we found out since, the drain pipes are all rotted out. They're all really old culverts down there, the metal corrugated.
From the school driveway down.
Down to Main Street. So that initially wasn't gonna be any major changes, just some grinding and paving. So for $7,700, which he given us a credit of $2,500 for what he did on Allen Street, he reduced that fixed fee to $5,200 to design that. So we talked to Mark Hume today from MDOT, and he suggests that we get another MPI grant submitted as soon as possible for that part of the project. It'll be a separate project. But we can, we can start right at, what's the name of that? Mendolia Road, and go up, once we get an Army Corps permit. And then, if we hear, as soon as we can about the MPI, then we would have to come up with half. So if you're looking at that part of the project between $400,000 and $500,000, then our share would be $200 to $250.
Assuming, though, that we get the grant.
Assuming that we get an MPI.
Right. When's the application going in, and who's gonna write it?
We haven't figured that out. We just met with Mark this morning.
Well, you've had,
I spoke with Daryl about it
I was
already.
gonna say Daryl.
I spoke with Daryl, we had the initial conversation,
Yep.
I just need to get the deadline set up, and we have the boilerplate from the original MPI grant, so it
Yep.
should be relatively easy to put out
Good.
and move
And-
quickly.
I was kidding when I said you've had 8 hours, what's up?
Right, all right.
And
Yes, Cindy.
the fact that this is a state aid road, I mean, wouldn't there be additional obligation for the state to,
5% match, you mean?
No, you saw what they did last summer. they just put that skinny mix out there. That's a Band-Aid to hold it together for another 5 years.
That's their only path that they're gonna have for this road ever, is that Band-Aid every 5 to 8 years, and they,
Look at Route 17, look at,
God,
yeah.
it's-
So and I can't remember, so forgive me, but, so the culvert issue, does it extend up beyond Loon
No.
Lake Road?
so, to back up, no, it doesn't currently. Our intention obviously is to extend that under drain system up additional 600 feet up Loon Lake Road to capture some of that water. So we're gonna introduce more capacity, or increase the capacity of those downhill structures. So through findings of that, we had the camera work done, found that the catch basins and pipes were in disrepair, mentioned to the state. That's when Mark suggested that we apply for the additional MPI. Obviously, what that's gonna do is it's gonna interrupt the sidewalks. We'll have to include that sidewalk, lower portion of the sidewalk into that MPI also.
Existing sidewalk, sorry.
That's down there, yeah, correct. And there's still an unknown on the Route 4 section of the under drain system, because couldn't get it cambered because there's too much debris in it, or there was at the time, and I couldn't tell you what's gonna happen from that point on.
So did they clean out the debris that's in there?
No idea. It's the state's responsibility.
State won't tell you, then we'll,
Mark's gonna look into it this spring. Best to have an answer for is this spring. We'll have a more discussion of the drainage work
okay, so,
down below.
So do I remember correctly, was that the stretch that Daryl was gonna look into a safe sidewalk
That's the
to
upper,
school?
the upper section.
The upper section, but what about that lower section that, I mean, the grant that we had,
It could all be part of that. I'm sure we could all, potentially could all be ground in.
wait a
If
minute,
it was
what are
gonna-
you talking about, lower section?
well, this Main Street to Mendolia, if you just talked about the sidewalks needing to be
They would have to be redone.
redone.
Once we start construction, because you're gonna interrupt 90% of the sidewalk by excavation.
Because the drainage is all on that side.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering if that needed to be looked at separately, because DOT is addressing that section.
See?
John?
He did say that by us doing the storm drains, then the sidewalk reconstruction becomes eligible as part of the MPI. So if we were looking at original cost of like $340,000 to do the pipes, he suggested you'd be better off to put it in for like $500,000, and then if you only spend $400,000, then they only reimburse us their half of that. So he said it's better to put it in initially and get the whole total project for $500,000 funded, and then if you don't spend it, you don't spend it. That's one of the things he suggested, because he said it would be no way you could then, if you were under budget on that or under estimate when you applied for the grant, then you gotta make up the difference by yourself.
Right. Dave?
So all that drainage down to bottom Blue Lake Road goes across under Route 4, right? And goes down between Russ Cove and Bone Spine. So is reconstructing all of that drainage, if we're gonna add capacity to it, part of this project?
Not from us. Loon Lake Road would be that $340,000 estimate right now for the repairs of that work. When you hit Route 4, that's on the state, and again, it comes down to what happens this spring when Mark has a discussion or determination of condition of that, the integrity of those 36-inch under drain system that goes down to the lake.
Cause that just dumps into the ditch in between, so if we're gonna add volume of water from up the hill another 600 feet, we're gonna increase the amount of water that goes down between
And I
those.
can tell you right now, the way Mark spoke today was, the under drain system is their responsibility, but once it dips onto somebody else's property, it comes down to the homeowner or the property owner at that point to make sure that still flows in an adequate manner.
That's weird, cause
Well, at what point do you start strong arming them?
I kind of started that point today with, what I did was when I went from the Little Lake Road conversation, because it was brought up about if we can't maintain the sidewalk that we have currently, why add an additional one? Which is obviously the reference to the sidewalk from Allen Street
Correct.
to your auto store. So I asked the question, I'm like, this is in our plan, but I don't wanna influence anything negatively. If I widen the sidewalk, raise it up, there's still a drainage issue here. Once I addressed that, I don't wanna add to that issue. And it came down to, his best answer he could give me was, the water goes there, our ditches are adequate. The outfall is on his property, it has to be maintained flow, so if he's not maintaining it, then that's the best I come up with. Unless it fails, and then they can have a drainage easement, and the state takes it over. But it has to fail completely, that's how I understood that.
So the way I understand what you're saying is the failure could impact 2 residences and several businesses, or 3, however many residences, and
Correct.
It's gonna flood Russell Cove and the building supply.
Right.
So the town's dumping more water onto residential property, there's gotta be erosion control measures, and it's gotta slow the flow down, there's that ditch way all the way down to the lake. I mean, we're dumping town rainwater into Rangeley Lake with high velocity.
Agreed.
And it sounds like you're gonna expand the volume of that if you start
More
collecting
than double
more
it.
water up above Mendolia
Right.
Road. And that's gonna put the
So I asked,
recipient of that at a disadvantage, and if the state's gonna say that's his problem now, you know,
Yikes.
it doesn't seem
No.
very fair.
and I asked the question, I apologize, I asked the question also, is if for some reason, we'll call it phase 2, Vandalia down to Main Street has to be held off, then this upper section gets constructed, we put the underground system in, all of a sudden now the added capacity deteriorates that system that much faster, and something happens in the meantime, you know, who's responsible for that? They didn't answer me necessarily. No, because the town has a plan to repair it, so does that mean also automatically we're eligible, or at fault and liable for that repair, or? There's a lot of unknowns, I guess, is the hard part.
well, one of the knowns is that this has been a priority project to fix Loon Lake Road. So the question then becomes, is how do we treat, I mean, we can't ignore the fact that the drainage lines are rotting out, to use your vocabulary earlier. And that was all videoed, correct?
All videoed, and, you know, and Eric LaBelle with Mainland's feeling that a cave-in is imminent. It's gonna happen. The pipes are rotted on the bottom, and some of them are already concaved from the pressure of the traffic and everything that comes through them, so, or over them.
And then it's filled up and plugged up down on Main Street, Route 4.
That's enough though that they couldn't put the camera through it. A 36-inch pipe. Now, I don't know if that means.
The camera's this big, for God's sakes.
Right, you know, so we'll figure their actual robotic cameras, 2.5 feet long, 6 inches tall, 8 inches wide.
Oh, one on wheels?
One on wheels.
Okay.
But, so I don't know if that means an obstruction that they couldn't get completely through, and they didn't want to go over a large obstruction, potentially not to pull it back out.
Understand.
That, I have the footage, I didn't watch that section. I watched enough to know that it was in desperate need of repair, more so than I thought we would want to put additional flow down through without having the conversation of what happens.
So we get back to the same conversation we had months ago about upper part of Loon Lake Road, and how do we deal with drainage? Do we have drainage pipe with catch basins and a sidewalk like we do in the lower section? Or do we have ditches like currently exist that are maintained periodically by those who, you know, whoever? But it all comes down, disadvantage or not, the water's flowing down that hill. And somehow we need to resolve that issue. So we can't slow this process down because the state isn't giving you a definitive answer, because we'll be in the same pickle next year as we were last year. Yeah. So could you fill us in on the timeframes that you're looking at now? In terms of, I know you met today and you got Daryl already involved, which is good.
We were looking at, on my calendar, he marked down either the 18th or the 24th of February, having bids come in. I think the 24th is
So bid packets are going out when?
There's a
in a couple
schedule
of
on
weeks.
the last page.
Go ahead.
There's a, not to interrupt, I apologize, but on that proposal for the lower and, or, for the bin administration and construction administration, there's a somewhat of a schedule, we're a little behind right now, but that would put you going, advertising for bids from January 27th to February 12th.
What's that?
That's not very far from now.
No.
And
I'm just stating the obvious.
Eric said this afternoon, he's like, if you guys still want that timeline, they'll make it happen.
Make it happen.
Does anybody not want that timeline?
No, I want that timeline, but, I'd like to know where we are with, how we're gonna design the road headed up, what kind of decision we're gonna come to as far as open ditches versus shoulders with drains versus sidewalk with drains.
Good point.
I think we haven't designed it with the sidewalk all the way up, and there's closed ditches.
Yeah, I don't know that we've decided that we're gonna spend all that money. We've talked about it.
We've talked
We
about it.
haven't
We haven't
decided
done
that, that's for sure.
No.
Right, but if he designs it for that, and we get the bid and see what the bids are actually, then we can cancel that if we had to. We can eliminate that from the contract. So it's,
So in other words, bid for the Cadillac and see where we go from there.
yeah,
Okay.
that was, I think, the feeling.
Good with that?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Then let's do that. You good with that?
Yeah,
If we're holding you up, Keith, go
No,
get
no,
some sleep, you know what I mean?
no, it's not that.
Well, so, drainage, watershed, I mean, we'd need the engineer to chime in and be like, okay, this combination of ditching is what's going to work or be best for
Right.
the town.
And ultimately, right now, I mean, I'm not an engineer by any means, but I think for the section from Mandolia to Henderson's house, that additional 600 feet, we'll call it, that water's gonna be in the same spot anyway. It goes to the same area, regardless.
Okay.
It comes down the hill to the school, and it's gonna hit the same catch basin regardless.
Okay,
The upper side, above that initial rise, has offshoots into the wetlands that are delineated already.
okay,
So, they have other catch basins off the road that do capture other low flow and put it
Okay.
off to natural wetlands also.
okay,
So I guess regardless of what concept you go with for that, especially the lower half from Henderson's down to Mandolia, again, the drainage goes to the same exact spot, so
So we
it's
still
all
have,
what,
the outlet problem's the outlet problem, no matter how we
correct.
proceed.
All right. Anything else on this topic? Thank you, Keith.
Well,
yeah, thank you.
Yep.
You need a motion to authorize, did we do that?
We do.
We do.
Two motions, two separate projects.
Anytime you're ready, Bob.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion, we authorize the town manager to sign the mainland phase 2 proposal for Lake Road construction.
Second?
Do you need it to specifically state bid administration and permitting?
I don't think you need to, it's in,
Okay.
it's in the,
It's just the phase 2 stuff.
proposal.
Okay.
Okay, any other discussion, comments, questions? All in favor? Move. Next one?
So your motion covered both.
We're all set then?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't like this part, so I'll go on public record to say that.
None of
We
it.
have a letter of resignation from Tricia Roy. She's gonna be leaving us here February 3rd, Tricia? Before I entertain a motion, I just want you to know that I, as a taxpayer and a member of this board, very much appreciate your professionalism and the job you have done for us and many of the different various tasks you've taken on. And if you need a letter of recommendation, call me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I need a motion to accept her resignation.
No.
It is with regret that I make a motion to accept the resignation of Tricia L. Roy as town clerk and registrar of voters.
Second. Reluctantly.
Anybody on the board like to say something? Besides me?
Not
Yeah.
this, she's
Cindy?
done a
Yeah,
great
I
job.
think it's, I think being the town clerk is a very, it's a tough job. Probably thankless. And I just really want to thank you, Tricia, for just handling some prickly matters with the dignity and professionalism that you do. And I'm really glad we had you for as long as we did, so thank you.
Ditto.
Good luck in the future endeavors.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Whoever gets you, young lady, is gonna be very, very happy.
Hope so.
All in favor? Yeah, I hate to raise my hand, but, yeah. I really wanted to go 0 to 5, no.
It is her wish.
That's true.
I think that would be a technicality that wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, you have department head updates in front of you. Next, I'd like to bring up the calendar. Wait a minute here, okay, the calendar, we have a meeting January 27th from 5 to 7 with this, what's that?
Yep.
With the selectmen and the budget committee, 5 to 7 on January 27th. Next up is mutual aid follow-up. There was a question, previous meetings that, anyways, we have a report from Chief Bacon about, you have it here, aids to Eustis, aids from Eustis, and the hours that each company spent. Just for the public's update, we provided mutual aid to Eustis, calls for aids, 16 of them, canceled 9, no apparatus rolled out of our building for a total of 11 hours. Aid from Eustis to Rangeley, calls for aid 3. They covered on one event for a total of 14 hours. But I heard something. Mutual aid agreement's been around how long, Johnny? I remember them back in the late 70s when I started.
Easily, if not even longer than that, and then they're constantly updated.
Yep.
Especially after everybody's short at some point, even us, we have days when we're having 2, 3 people turn out for stuff, so. Mutual aid's crucial. Stratton's always been there for us, as you can see by the report. If we went back the last 3 years, we did rough numbers, and they far have put in way more time over here than we have the one time they've asked us to help them.
Mutual aid agreements, incidentally, just don't revolve around the fire department. That's also an agreement with EMS, ambulance services and so on. Police, I believe, is a vastly different world, and their mutual aid agreements are treated differently and such. But,
Steve,
yes, John?
it's also all over the whole state.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
prevalent everywhere.
Yeah.
It's been in place, like you say, 60s, 70s, long time.
I don't get to tout his horn, and I know he won't do it, but Johnny Wakefield has been helping Farmington out since the explosion and still continues to do so, I understand. And there are other firemen and EMS personnel in the area that are doing the same thing.
Yep.
Let's hope we never experience anything like that. But remember, not too long ago, when our Canadian brothers and sisters up north experienced what they did in Lake Meganic, we received an award for all of the things that we did to help them in their time of need, so mutual aid's important. Any other comments on that, questions?
A big thank you to Chief Bacon.
That's it, yeah, to all of you, Chief Bacon. Mutual aid. John, you want to address the school resource officer compensation?
Yeah, the police chief has been, he spends a lot of time up at the school, so we actually met with the superintendent office, and I don't know, 2 people there, I think one might have been the principal.
Principal was there, the superintendent was there, John Madigan was there, I was there, and the chief was there.
Chief.
Yeah.
And I asked the chief to write this up so that we'd all know better exactly what he does up there and what the school expects, and they're willing to pay $6,000 a year to cover some of those expenses, so, I wanted you to all see, to me, it's, boy, it's, for a small town to have a, school resource officer, we could call, that's what we're calling him. And, he averages maybe about 10 hours a week. So he's there when the kids get off the school bus, and he's there at lunchtime sometimes, he's there at games at they play in the gym, and you can read all the different things he does up there, and he's well received by the school staff and the parents. So, I think we need to talk about, what to do with that $6,000. We don't have to do it now, but we can think about, I think the chief certainly deserves some of that for his extra effort to do this, So, wanted you to see what he wrote up. I'm pleased to see that. That's pretty much what we talked about when we were up there.
Yeah, we did.
And they actually put that in this year's budget, and they plan on putting it in the next budget to continue this going if we're in agreement. I could write up a little agreement that the superintendent can sign, and I can sign if you want to vote something. That way we'll have it documented. So if you want to think about it for a while, that's fine. But,
Well, let's give the board a couple weeks, to think about it, put it on our next agenda.
And I'll try to draft up some kind of
Okay.
agreement both of us can sign, us and the school.
Mr. Chairman, isn't that kind of
Kind of a no-brainer.
Go ahead,
a
Larry.
right-hand payment?
Louder?
Isn't that kind of a left-hand, right-hand payment since we're not subsidized in education?
Well, I mean, it is sort of, it's all coming out of our tax base, but the question is, he's up there as part of, it's not part of his job description, and now we're looking at, he's putting time up there. There should be some part of their budget that compensates
Yeah,
him.
it's our money, it's not like we're subsidized at the school per child, we're already over per cost per student, so.
What's your recommendation?
I don't understand why you take money from my pocket and put it in the right.
Yeah, I mean,
I think they want some kind of guarantee because there are separate boards that govern the school and the
We
town.
fund it.
Huh?
But we fund it.
Exactly. Well, no, the RSU is of all the
Already over.
plantations and,
We're only billing out 10,000, and it costs us 15, let's say. So they're not gonna raise their subsidies because we pay a police officer.
there's some other people, though, that look at the job description and say, look, you're not paid to be doing this thing, so don't bother going up there. Where there's other people that say there's value in this thing, so let's get money out of that budget to pay for his raises that don't want to seem to be funded out of this
The reason I
budget.
could see why they would pay us is if they were subsidized for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a way to look at it. I mean, but on the other hand, it is an accounting process that has to be done. Question mark?
They'll give us 10,000 so we can raise another 10.
What's that?
They're gonna give us 10 so we can raise another 10.
well, at least the school budget is spread amongst Rangeley 4 plantations.
It isn't, but it's not an even spread.
Yeah.
It's cost us more than they pay us.
But it is.
It's certainly not an even spread, but you're getting a portion out of those plantations to fund something that's coming out of this budget that isn't being funded by plantations.
I get what you're saying
I don't
here.
think you are, Steve. I think state average is 11, they only pay you 11 and it's cost you 15. You're already -3 per student.
If you're gonna do the math that way, sure, but if you're looking at the fact that we're paying the chief weekly a salary,
Yeah.
and out of that, 10 hours isn't being done for just exclusively the town of Rangeley, it's for,
I understand your argument when you say that you pay yourself.
No,
Okay.
I get your point.
you had a question, Mark?
I was just gonna say, when you debate this, and I think the school resource officer, it may make sense to isolate that title and whatever money the school's gonna give, because it may not always be the chief, rather than just add it to his salary, so that when you go to replace the chief, it doesn't have something that's not in his job description, and, then you end up paying the chief, the stipend for the school resource when it may be somebody else doing the job.
Point taken, thank you.
That
Yep.
makes sense.
Yep, point taken. Anything else on this? Thank you, Larry and Mark, for bringing that up. Yep, before we move on, I do want to say, though, that this was the first time I had an opportunity, and I think it was the first time you met the superintendent,
Yeah.
in the for what it's worth category. He's a sharp man, he knows his business. He's a good guy. I also had an opportunity to bump into him when we did the party for the kids at Christmas time. He attended, and it's good to see children gravitate around people they respect, and he certainly is one of them. So again, for what it's worth category. Next up, fiscal year 21 Franklin County Budget Program Grant Funding. Questions? Comments?
Just that they decided to not fund probably any of these outside requests, including things like Western Main Transportation, senior citizens.
Seniors Plus, yeah.
you know,
All the stuff we get
Seniors
money to.
Plus, WMT, what's that, Western Main Transportation?
Yeah.
This one is the CAP agency,
Community Action Program.
yep, community action, and they're the ones that do the heating program, usually, at least in Oxford County, they do that. And they help a lot of people, you know. So, just passing it all, with, you know, those kind of organizations impact everybody in the county. And makes perfect sense to ask the county to fund them, which they've done for a number of years, obviously. Now they're backing off. So I've already had an email I see from Western Main Transportation, so I'm sure they wanna approach us to get on for, you know, recommended funding.
Right.
I think we used to do that before, but it's been a good deal of time going to all the towns and there are 3 county organizations, so Oxford, Franklin, and Androscoggin, so they have to go to every town to, you know, seek a couple $100 from each town. It's a lot more efficient for them to go to the county and we each pay our share, so.
Well, they're barking up a pretty tight tree here when you go down to Franklin County meetings. If you've never attended one, that's an education.
You didn't see that all coming last year when you saw their budget versus their expenses.
Well, I've been going to them for quite a few years, so it's, I hear you. It's different.
And we also, last year, stopped funding the county economic development office.
Right.
Last year they started that.
Yep.
Passing it down to the towns.
Yeah, but they didn't, I don't think they came up here asking for money last year.
They did, Charlie was here last year.
He
Yeah.
was?
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't remember.
My guess is,
We
it'll-
got all these at once, and I figured, well, you guys need to know, because we're gonna be coming to the town.
yep. What would be the reception, do you think, hypothetically, if we decided to treat Franklin County like we were treated by one of our plantation's neighbors? And decide, well, shoot, $600,000, send them $500,000. How do you like that?
We tried that once.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
Budget committee looked at
Yeah.
2 years ago.
All right, it was being, no, I didn't know, Mark.
Oh, no,
We should discuss this.
on, a couple years ago, I don't remember if you were chairman or Cindy was the chairman, but for our own budget process,
Cindy was the chair.
I gave a handout, the suggestion that the town adopt a policy similar to the funding formula that for all these nonprofits and donations that come before us, that the town of Rangeley cap their contribution at 50%, because it was obvious that the other plantations weren't even being asked to contribute that amount, and you know, so they all paid, their cumulative total was 50%, you know, and it could be more, but Rangeley's maximum would be 50%, and that never went anywhere, but I started thinking about it again, and I was wondering if you could maybe just ask MMA if it's even legal to, you know, adopt some type of policy or an ordinance like that.
But don't you risk a chance they're just gonna jack up how much they need to make up for the difference?
But the other 3 plantations would have to pay 50% of whatever they're asking
Yeah,
for.
good luck there. But you never know.
Or we match whatever we'd match the cumulative total of the plantations, not to exceed 50% of their total request.
Okay, that would work if,
Bring it to the budget committee,
but
see what they
there you
say.
go.
Well,
It's-
I
they
don't
don't-
think they have access to
No.
MMA, but you folks do, so I think. it would-
Oh, in terms of the request for legality?
Yeah, to
okay.
see if, to see if it's a permissible thing.
There's a state law that outlines what's eligible, who may be eligible to ask for donations from the town. Mostly nonprofit corporations.
Right, but I'm talking about the town's share of those requests.
You can pick any number
Because,
you want,
because
right from
you
zero
never
up
get
to what they're.
to ask for in excess of 200,000, if I remember, the last time.
180, I
And,
think.
you know,
I'm gonna respectfully bring this one to a close, because we'll get that on the agenda during
sure,
budget
that's-
session.
That's fine, I'm good.
But thank you, Mark.
That's,
Yep. Anything else on the Franklin County budget FYI 21?
You know, we need to get somebody on the,
Budget committee,
we need a commissioner.
Budget committee.
the Franklin County.
It'd be nice if we could get somebody on the commission.
I neglected to raise my hand last year, but I would be willing to do that this year. I'll go down.
I don't know when Clyde's up, but.
I'm
Oh, you
sorry?
need to run for
Oh,
commissioner?
run for commissioner?
Yes.
Get out of town.
I
Three
don't
of
mean
them?
you, I mean somebody from up here, well, Steve Bean did it.
Oh,
And,
Steve Bean
uh,
did it, yeah. but,
and, You know, we're kind of a hole up here that they don't even, you know, they don't think that goes past the Farmington line.
The only one that's graced this doors is Clyde Barker. We'll
Yeah.
move on.
Well, we could always just reevaluate the town, then we could lower the current.
Well, they are talking about going to 5 this year. That's in the pipeline, and that,
That's been hashed over for a long
I'm not
time.
sure what-
yeah, it's still in the pipeline. It didn't get bounced out of committee. I checked on
Good.
it.
So it might come up during this second.
Yeah, it's gonna come up during this session.
Yeah.
It may.
The same thing, us in Kingfield, kind of, that area.
I don't know what the break is.
That's what it was supposed to be anyway, in the
Yeah.
beginning. So, anyway,
Anything else under that? Select Board Communications.
I'd like to, I mean, the comprehensive plan hasn't been talked about in quite a while, and we're coming upon, let's see, it was created in 2012, so we're coming upon the end of its, 10-year stretch here. And it might be nice if the individual boards and committees took a look at the action steps that they are assigned to in the comprehensive plan, and just see where they are, what has been, what they can check off the list. I mean, certain things are ongoing, but it hasn't been discussed in a while, and just as with all the work that went into it, it should be, the boards and committees themselves, I mean, really should be looking at where they are as far as their compliance with the action steps or goals that, they have.
I would assume things like the big park renovation would have been on the comprehensive plan and of course.
The establishment of an economic development committee is on the comprehensive plan, and so, yeah.
Major road work or airport work, so we'll look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want it to be a town manager burden. I really think the committees or boards should own it.
Who's gonna mandate that?
I don't know. I mean, is it, we don't appoint every board or committee. Some are
somebody else.
elected, but yeah, I would think that it would be a directive from the board to start.
All right. You have a question?
I was just gonna say, just send out a memo
Yeah.
to the chairman of the different boards there, and see what happens.
Here's what we want you to do, and there you go.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you, Mark. I hate to do this to you guys, but I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. I'm gonna stop and see your wife tomorrow on my way down.
What's that?
I'm gonna stop and see Jenny on my way down tomorrow. If I don't get it on my way down, I'll be on the way back.
Great, thank you.
Be there?